Meanwhile, at the bunker, not having been told to delay the firing, a finger touches the fatal button. Although many miles from Bomb Zero, Dr. Bruce Banner is bathed in the full force of the mysterious gamma rays. The world seems to stand still, trembling on the brink of infinity, as his ear-splitting scream fills the air. This was the dramatic beginning for one of comic books' most popular and unique characters, the Incredible Hulk. 40 years later, the Incredible Hulk is as resilient as the company that created him, Marvel Comics. Owned by publisher Martin Goodman, Marvel was launched in October 1939 under the name of Timely Comics. The first books featured science fiction heroes, the Human Torch and the Submariner. Both characters offered an escape from the country's Depression-era anxieties.
Comic books, all in all, are a reflection of the times we live in. Especially then, they reflected fears, social economics, wars, and so on.
In the wake of Nazi aggression in World War II, Marvel introduced the ultimate superhero, Captain America, in 1941. Later that year, Marvel hired an ambitious 16-year-old high school graduate named Stanley Lieber. Lieber got his first writing assignment on the third issue of Captain America. The passage was entitled, "Captain America Foils the Traitor's Revenge." Lieber signed it Stan Lee. The 1950s proved to be a creatively challenging decade for Marvel due to post-war issues of communism and nuclear weapons.
But the 1960s, that was the big time, because that's when we came up with characters like the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Daredevil, and all the other characters which are now thought of as the giants of the Marvel galaxy. After having done our first of the Marvel line of books called the Fantastic Four, I was looking for something else that would be totally different. Then I remembered I had always loved the old movie with Boris Karloff, Frankenstein. And it always seemed to me that the monster played by Karloff wasn't really the bad guy. He was the good guy. He didn't want to hurt anybody. It's just those idiots with torches kept running up and down the mountains, chasing him and getting him angry. Then I remembered another favorite of mine, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And Dr. Jekyll was a normal man who turned into Mr. Hyde. So I combined Jekyll and Hyde with Frankenstein, and I got myself the monster I wanted, who was really good, but nobody knew it. And he was also somebody who could change from a normal man into the monster.
May 1962 marked the release of Lee's monster, the Incredible Hulk, and his alter ego, Dr. Bruce Banner.
Bruce Banner is a scientist. He's working with gamma research. And our story is about the guy who is harnessing this incredible energy.
The important thing with any hero, the reader has to empathize with the hero, has to care about the hero. So when I wanted my normal character, Bruce Banner, to be the hero, and I thought I would let him become the Hulk in a very heroic way. There was going to be a test explosion out in some lonely field. Now, Bruce Banner, conducting the test, saw a teenager named Rick Jones. He heroically ran out into the field, grabbed the kid, tackled him, and threw him down on the ground, and the explosion occurred. And poor Bruce was inundated with all of those gamma rays.
Instead of killing him, the explosion left Bruce Banner with superhuman powers.
On the surface, it would seem as though the Hulk is a very simplistic character. He's just an angry monster. But there's really so much more to it than that, because he still has dim memories of his human self. In a way, he hates Bruce Banner, because to him, Bruce Banner represents a weakling, whereas the Hulk is all-powerful. So there's that dichotomy within him.
And the tragedy of it, that when the Hulk comes down to be Bruce, when you see the carnage around, is the guilt of a very decent man who's looking around saying, I should have never let it out.
Stan Lee had developed a complex character in every way, from his behavior to his appearance.
Well, my first choice was Gray, because he was a monster, he's supposed to be scary, and I figured gray is kind of a scary color. But there was a problem. When the book was printed, the printer was having trouble keeping the color consistent. So I decided in my infinite wisdom, I'll change his color. And I looked around and tried to think what color is no superhero wearing at that time, and I figured green. Nobody was green that I knew of. So I said, okay, let's color him green. It was as casual as that.
After 6 issues, the Incredible Hulk began to appear in other books, such as the Fantastic Four and Tales to Astonish. As the Incredible Hulk continued to develop a loyal following, Marvel continued to exploit his various personality traits.
I stopped writing the Hulk after the first 20 issues. Now, after that, many other writers and artists did the strip. So over the years, the Hulk has changed. In some stories, he suddenly became very intelligent. You know, when I had done him, he could hardly speak. So he's been done in every way you could imagine.
Dr. Banner, belted by gamma rays, turns into the Hulk.
and glamour rays.
In 1966, the Incredible Hulk found his way to television as one of the stars of the animated series, The Marvel Superheroes.
Ever-loving Hulk! Hulk!
Dr. David Banner, physician, scientist, searching for a way to tap into the hidden strengths that all humans have. Then an accidental overdose of gamma radiation alters his body chemistry. When David Banner grows angry or outraged, a startling metamorphosis occurs.
Those were the words heard by millions of television viewers who tuned in each week to watch the live-action version of The Incredible Hulk. The primetime series began airing on CBS in 1978 and starred actor Bill Bixby.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
And bodybuilder Lou Ferrigno as the Incredible Hulk. In this version, Banner's name was changed from Bruce to David. The popular series created an entire new legion of Hulk fans, many who were unaware of the comic book.
There's almost nobody anywhere in the world who doesn't remember the Incredible Hulk, played by Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby. The thing that people like about the Hulk, the transformation, is he would start to morph into the Hulk, and you'd see his shoulders starting to break through the shirt he was wearing. I can't tell you how people loved that one scene. Men and women, children, they would cheer when that scene would start. As scientifically oriented as I may be, as careful as I am with every scientific fact, I had trouble explaining how his pants stayed on. We cheated. We took the cowardly way out. He was wearing long pants. When he became the Hulk, we made the pants shorter, so his legs would just burst through, and we hoped that too many people wouldn't notice.
As in the comic book, the television series looked at Banner's turmoil, his internal rage, and his continuous search for inner peace.
It does give him the opportunity to know that he has a way to stop evil and do get involved in situations and just try and be a decent guy. Was always the fear that he may erupt and go over the top.
In 1982, after 5 seasons, the Incredible Hulk series was canceled by CBS. Stan Lee's enduring character had dominated the comics, Saturday morning cartoons, and primetime television. The only medium left to conquer was the big screen. The long-awaited Universal feature film about the Incredible Hulk has been the most anticipated appearance of the superhero in decades.
You're gonna have to watch that temper of yours.
I feel like I have been researching to bring the Hulk to life for years. The great thing about everyone at Universal is that they didn't just want to make an action film. They wanted to make a film that explored character and drama and emotion. Because Stan Lee and Avi Arad were involved from the inception of the project through to the production and post-production of the film, there has been a great deal of awareness of what it is that the fans relate to in the Hulk. And we have been very, very careful of keeping true to what it is that makes Hulk great.
For the producers and writers, making The Incredible Hulk innovative meant implementing the latest developments in filmmaking wizardry.
Without the advances in technology, we couldn't have made the movie the way it will be.
So we had people helping us imagine what the Hulk would look like. Then we had great artists building sculptures, clay maquettes.
Now this is pretty much a CG model from the sculpt.
And from there, the geniuses at ILM scanned those maquettes into their computers and started the enormous and laborious work.
We were able to create a human creature, an organic creature with skin, with hair, with eyes, with tears, with sweat. Everything that a human being, good or bad, is now in this creature. So it's no longer a maquette brought to life. It's living, it's breathing, it's moving, it's falling, it's hurting.
The merging of the film's technology with the performances of its cast was the challenge for director Ang Lee.
I think it's time to bring a sophistication in public entertainment in the computer world. So you can invest your emotion into it, not just watching a creature go crazy, where in the back of your head you know they're CGIs. I want to see if I can break that barrier. And also it's a challenge to me, can I make Bruce Banner and the Hulk as one person? Instead of like the comic or the TV series, they're two actors or two different entities.
And Ang Lee was at the top of the list, and he was at the top of the list because of his body of work. He never seems to do the same thing twice. And it's the humanity in every one of his films that really spoke to us.
In the film, Lee stays true to the original themes of the Hulk's humanness and Bruce Banner's cutting-edge work in nuclear science.
Of course, we're gonna do gamma radiation, but I think Ang wanted something that went a little beyond that. In the 50s, of course, radiation was enough to create everything from giant ants to I don't know, murderous cereal flakes or who knows what. It was the explanation that worked no matter what you needed. But I think Ang thought that you needed a little more.
We're doing a contemporary piece, so we have to upgrade that. We still reserve the gamma exposure, but the gamma is more of a control factor to their experiment on this nanomat, those little molecular machines that does the curing and everything. So it's the two put together that unleash what's in there.
The very first thing that they wanted me to do was to come up with a kind of self-consistent explanation for the research that the scientist characters in the film were pursuing that would then lead to the accident that creates the Hulk. Ang very much wanted to know what would make a Hulk, and very specifically what happens is that the little nanomeds, as we've been calling them, go haywire in Bruce's body. They don't maintain an even balance between destroying damaged cells and replicating good ones. So it's a kind of organized cancer in a way, in the sense that they maintain the existing structure, and so you get a bigger and bigger and bigger guy, a Hulk guy.
In the film, Ang Lee uses the work of David and Bruce Banner as a metaphor for the difficult relationship between father and son.
Dad's working on super immune systems, human bodies that are capable of withstanding more, rejecting more, not being infected as easily. The son is working on the same kind of thing, but with a very modern kind of bent. He's trying to devise these little micromechanical U-boats, really, that are injected into the body and that swim around and repair damaged cells. So I think that kind of collision between those two generations of science is very interesting.
The popularity of Stan Lee's complicated character, the Incredible Hulk, is as strong today as it was when it first appeared in 1962.
It's one of these characters that you walk in the street, you show someone a picture, say, "What's that?" And they look at it and say, "Hulk." You know that this is a Hulk, and the Hulk is big, as mad, as raging, as everything, is the good guy. And that's great to have this giant, incredible ball of energy that is on the side of right.
I never imagined 40 years ago that I would be sitting and being interviewed and talking about this character and the fact that it would be the subject of a major motion picture, the fact that it would still be more popular than ever 40 years later. No, I wouldn't have imagined that in a million years.
The great thing about working with Ang Lee is it's not difficult to get great actors' attention. And then when you say Ang Lee plus the Hulk, of course everybody thought, well, that's bizarre. I better find out more about it.
It's so remarkable, I think, the way he looks at the world, you know. It's really lyrical sensibility.
He's very special, you know, there's no other word for it, and that's why so many people are interested in this film, and it's why so many people will go and see the film.
Ang brought in an entire sensibility and a focus on what is it that drives Bruce Banner? What is it that brings the Hulk to life?
He's incredibly brilliant, and at the same time, he's also very humble. And I think people see that in him and so just want to do things for him. Everyone wants to go the extra mile for him.
The whole combination of doing a superhero summer film, but from Ang Lee's perspective, is pretty exciting.
He was challenging me often to go move outside of my own perspectives, and I always welcome that.
Action. 3, 2, 1, go!
This is my first Hollywood experience, so to speak, and is like the biggest movie Universal ever made. It's the first Marvel superhero who is a monster. It's tragic and it has a lot of complexity, psychodrama, so that's all good stuff for me. I call it my new Green Destiny. It's the enigmatic effort to put pulp culture, pulp art with serious drama and try to make it work.
Action.
Okay, 13 seconds. We are set for double exposure.
Just be a sec.
Because I knew Ang was going to direct, I almost didn't dare come up with my own vision of what it may be. I just went in with my eyes wide open. It was interesting. I know Ang was at pains to really try and come up with some kind of tangible link with reality, even though we're in this kind of surreal comic book world. And I knew that Ang was visually doing that in so many different ways during the film. At times I wouldn't press him. I just wouldn't always want to know everything and just try and work on my own little world, knowing that you're in the hands of a master and someone who everything is where it is for a very good reason.
Action.
I must have seen you or known you.
I've seen comic book movies that sort of really play into, oh, this is a comic book, so we're going to make it kind of campy. And I think what I liked about Aang's approach is that he didn't want his central characters to feel that way. He really wanted them to be invested in what they were doing. And so my character, she looks like a girl that you would really see in a lab. You know, she's not like lab coat, hair up, glasses. You know, that version of it. It's really a more honest version of what a woman who worked in a lab in Berkeley would be. You know, he really played it as if this were a very serious drama.
Well, I got news for you. I didn't come here to see you. I came here to see my son.
When Aang came out to the house and we sat down and talked, he said we could explore the darkness of relationship father-son. We were on sync, I think probably the moment we looked at each other.
I think bringing some realism is important to bring the audience into the world and believing it. It's just a path, it's not the end goal. Somehow you have to make it real to bring them in the first place.
Leaning back a little bit.
Leaning back a little farther.
You had your chest a little back.
I think Aang is an incredibly ethereal human being. Ethereal in the sense of that his ideas are floating in an ether above him and around him, that he's picking at them and expressing them and showing to you in a way that it's not quite definable. It's not like certain directors where you're able to say, oh, there's the idea and I'm being given this take on this character or this take on the way to play a scene.
Action. I'm not sure you've got much of a choice. Come on, Bruce, aren't you feeling a little angry?
This role was unbelievable, and also serving a master such as Aang is a huge responsibility, and it's the fact that he chose me to help him with that vision. It's been a almost life-changing experience. It's certainly something I'll never forget.
I like it.
Aang had to become the Hulk for all of us, and he did. And on the set, he was able to communicate to the actors who the Hulk was and what he was doing and the emotion and the drama and the power in every scene in which there was interaction with the cast and a digital creation.
Because we have to create a character from nothing, and I want to treat him like an actor, not a cartoon character. I want him to act as much as the rest of the cast act, who are good actors. I want to bring the realism, and the movie is very much rests on his shoulder. So it's very important for us.
A beat before
it looks like when he threw it out, he was like...
I've loved Aang's films ever since Sense and Sensibility. And so I've really respected the fact that he can direct actors so subtly. And up to now, almost every computer animated character out there has been way too broad. So finally we're going to see an animated character really act like a real person. And that goes back to real life. All our animators are required to look at real life reference.
Sometimes it would be simply going from workstation to workstation, hundreds of animators at work on these computers at ILM, and Aang going from shot to shot, directing everything from the flicker of an eyebrow to the movement of an earlobe, to Aang or stunt guys or whoever putting on the motion capture suit.
And most of the time we actually would get Aang. We'd stop him in the hallway, we'd bring him into one of our offices, we'd have Aang do the performance. When he has something in his mind and no actor in the world can get exactly what he's looking for, we just say, well, you know, show us what you want and we'll get exactly that. You seem to do a bit of a pause before you then look at the father.
I thought it was too obvious.
Okay. I mean, you can change it up at this point anytime you want.
It's very hard, for some reason, to bring the realism of how he moves, the physics. So we need some kind of blueprint. I don't think we have that much time, so the quickest way to do it is me putting on a suit instead of directing someone.
Look out, good therapy.
And action!
The purpose of motion capture is to get realistic animation data to drive computer-generated characters. You know, when he's out there, it's a big deal. He's very serious about about getting the performances, he apparently has a lot of acting experience, and he gets completely into character.
That moment was good.
Okay, okay. He does know what he likes. He knows what doesn't work. He's very meticulous, but we have a whole team here very willing to make his vision come to life.
Hang in there.
Hang's working for his money today.
Normally, the director is busy getting his next film going or working on the sound or the editing of the film that we're working on. But to have a director here is really great, and it's very important on this film because he's essentially directing the star of the movie. You know, one of the principles of the film, the Hulk, needs to be directed by the director, not by anybody else. You know, you ask for a performance and you refine it and you react to it and change it, and you get the scene you want, whether it's Eric or Jennifer or Nick or whatever, and he's doing it, in this case, with us.
And action. And 1, and 2, and freeze.
With Aang, he has such a special vision for this picture. It's just amazing to watch the way he can pull performances out of not only the human characters, but working with ILM and saying, well, here's what I want to do for Hulk when he's in this. You know, he may have him just cringe up and do something really, small and intricate, or something just, really grand and large.
And action. And we cut.
To be working with a guy like Ang Lee and to see the way he can bring a just totally different spin to a comic book movie.
Ready.
When I first talked to Aang, one of the things he said, which I don't know if he meant as a joke or not, but he said he was looking for the sound of green. And so we've been thinking about that. Right off the bat, he asked for signature sounds that would feel like the Hulk is deep inside Bruce Banner, but even before we see the Hulk. So I like that kind of approach.
Gary and I are both hoping to have this big sounding movie, but also have some interesting detail to it and some subtleties that you wouldn't really expect from a big object. In fact, the most interesting scenes, sounding-wise, in my opinion, are the subtle scenes when he's inquisitive with his eyes and breathing, and all that, comes down to a very quiet moment. Aang and I and Gary discussed this to determine whether we should be giving Danny Elfman some cues on where he might want to hold back scoring the film to allow for those more subtler things.
I gotta talk to you, Edith.
As we worked together, his direction was much different than most directors I've worked with, because it was more psychological, internal, about the process and the characters. And he challenged me often to not sound like myself. So I'd be playing music and he'd go, no, that's too Danny Elfman, too Danny Elfman. And I really liked that.
One of the reasons that Aang is perfect for the Hulk is that on the one hand, he's the nicest guy in show business, and on the other hand, he's probably the most ambitious.
As this will fall off, and I will kill the second beat, which is the top.
You can spend time in preparation with Aang and think, this is going to be a breeze, and then turn around and realize that you've just been talked into doing about 100 times more work than you ever thought you could produce in your life.
Well, that's involving everything, be personal, attending every aspect of it down to the very last detail is the only way I know how to make movie. It's just I don't know any other way to make movie. From the first small movie I did in New York, being the independent filmmaker, to Chinese film, that's the only way I don't know it. If I cannot personally attend, then I shouldn't do the movie. So the size of the movie ends on how much I decide I can be personal, put my hands on. I think that's important in filmmaking. Not that I'm a control freak, but I think All the elements have to be in one movie, one vision.
One sequence, Hulk meets and fights 3 dogs that they've been trained to go after Betty's scent, and they're trying to get her. And Hulk is there, thank God, at the right moment to protect her from them.
Then we have close shot on 16 of the 3 dogs. This is the first time we see the dogs.
The first meeting about the dog fight, I think, was about a year ago, and Dennis and Colin and I went down to LA. There was a huge roundtable discussion, and Ang presented the sequence in huge, thick boards.
200 shots, it's probably $15 or $16 million worth of CGI, animation, 3 dogs, a guy, whatever.
I don't know how much this is going to cost.
A lot. The producers and I were all giving each other's looks like, who's going to tell them that there's absolutely no way we can do this, you know, but we all kind of tried to remain calm.
It will be much faster than what it reads.
That was the constant battle of being able to create enough space for Ang that he could create his movie, but at the same time trying to put it in some realm of reality.
Well, I think one thing is obvious, we can't do all of this. So
it took a lot of meetings, and it took a lot of boiling down to actually what are we going to do.
It ends up we only got to do a quarter of it because that would be too expensive. I didn't know what cost what. That's a good discipline for me because I have to take the best shot. So whatever I make on the movie, they're the best shots. Page 1, chapter 1. So Betty hears something outside and she takes the flashlight.
So there's this sequence where Betty discovers Hulk at the cabin, and he steps out, and there's this very tender interaction.
And to establish the eye lines, they have this like pole that looks like, you know, what you'd skim a pool with, you know, it's like retractable kind of pole, and they've got this cardboard cutout, literally cardboard cutout, of a Hulk head. And some guy stands around with this head on a stick, you know, and says, okay, well, at this point it's that high, and then it's here, and so they do that, and it's for me to kind of get a reference of where it's gonna be. And then I don't even have that, then they take that away when we shoot, you know.
So we shoot the background plates with the actors acting to a big cardboard cutout of the Hulk's head or something, and I'm always there when that's done to remind everybody of how big he is and where the eye line is and, you know, what should be moving around when he walks in front of something.
3, 2, 1, action.
And then being on wires and, okay, the Hulk's picking you up. So, but in real life, what's happening is I'm standing there doing sort of mime 101, you know, going like, Hulk's picking me up now, and, you know.
That was partially done as keyframe animation, partially based on video reference, and partially done based on motion capture of Ang.
And action.
Ang enjoyed being in the motion capture suit and enjoyed being the Hulk. So when he felt that he wasn't getting what he really wanted and he couldn't express it, he would get in the motion capture suit and go, this is what he should do, you know, sort of.
Where Hulk is looking deeply into Betty's eyes, having a very subtle change of emotion or mood. It turned out that the motion capture was a good way to capture kind of the essence of those subtle interactions.
It's very hard, for some reason, to bring the realism of how he moves, the physics. So we need some kind of blueprint. The quickest way to do it is me putting on a suit. The dogfight is designed to give us a good chance to show the visceral side of the Hulk.
Ang kept hammering it home that he did not want the fight to look choreographed. He wanted it to look very visceral and primal and out of control. We just poured over reference tapes of dogs attacking each other. We noticed very quickly that there's a randomness and a messiness to the animals that we were wondering if there's any other way we could capture it. I had talked to Seth Rosenthal about dog motion capture.
No, go back down, sit down. Our stage coordinator, Bill Telesti, found a dog trainer by the name of Joe Lucero who breeds his own dogs and trains them in a way in which they retain this kind of wild character, but are still very, you know, very controlled and contained.
And we put all these little markers on this poor dog, and we had him do a bunch of exercises to really study the dog motion.
The dog had done a really good job, and so Joseph gave it the chew toy and he started wrestling with it. And then all of a sudden he fell down and him and the dog were rolling around. And Colin and myself looked at each other and went, wait a minute, this could look really cool if we amp it up. So we came up with the notion of putting Joe in the motion capture suit to do a few shots where Hulk has to kind of roll on the ground and roughhouse with the dogs. And it looks really vicious, but they feel it's very playful.
And it wound up being fantastic, and Ang was thrilled with what we could get from the dogs.
Although these dogs are 6 feet tall and they're as big as horses, and they don't actually move like a real dog, so there's some adjustments that have to be made along the way for that too.
A lot of it had to be blended with real keyframe hand animation.
Rolling. We're rolling. And action. 1, 2.
The raw result of the motion capture is 3D data from the markers. And that data has to be mapped onto a character in the computer. And we have a few different techniques for driving a skeleton. Once we turn the mocap data over to the animators, they have a whole host of tricks that they use to make the shots look good.
When I take the first stab at it with the animators, we'd often err on playing a monster. And we learned very quickly it wasn't a monster. We would stomp around and we would pretend like we're big, heavy guys, and we'd lift things up and we'd always overemphasize certain motions. And Ang would say, this isn't WWF wrestling. This is the real deal. If you're gonna pick something up, violently, just pick it up. Don't play it up for the camera.
As far as I know, no director has ever put on the motion capture suit and played a key role. And so it was a unique experience to have Ang come in, direct himself. He's very intense. He gave a lot of performances where he would just explode with the rage of the Hulk. Sometimes we were a little startled by just by his intensity.
Almost all the time, Ang would go for the sloppy performances, the unexpected performances. Anytime things were overly clean, he would say, no, that looks like animation. And so really the goal here is to not make it look like animation, to go for all those imperfections that come out of real life. We try to get distinct personalities out of each dog. We have Lily, the poodle. She's the leader, and she's kind of fidgety and very hyper, very on edge. We have a giant mastiff. He's very bear-like and very thick in the way he moves. And then we have Sammy, the pit bull, and he's very lion-like. He's all about his jaw. So in addition to getting realistic dog movement, we're also trying to make sure they're not just simply generic dogs. We want to come to the theater to see something supernatural. It's a very, very painful, long process about putting all the little detail. We have a whole team that just simply does the paint. Every little pore and every little detail, that's their job. Another team that's just sculpting the muscles.
My job is to integrate the Hulk and the dogs into the background elements. We'll add in very subtle, but still very important foot debris. The foot debris gives us the sensation that the dogs are kicking up the ground. We also add in the steam for the mouth. In the dogfight sequence, it's supposed to be really cold. And one of the more complicated aspects of the dogs is the drool. The funny thing about drool is every once in a while you get interesting results. This is drool that's a little too gooey, and this is tinsel teeth. And then this is the final render of the drool, which turned out quite nice. These are a few of the more complex creatures that have gone through the ILM fur pipeline. The poodle, for example, has 1.5 million hairs.
That's a rough sketch.
How long do you think the sequence lasts?
I don't know.
I think the flavor of what he originally wanted is still there. It's just a little bit shorter.
I had the greatest time in my life making a movie with those island people. And as a result, we have Hulk fighting the 3 Hulk dog scene. as visceral, as terrifying as we can imagine, and it's very satisfying. It's like, well, it's like watching monster truck, kind of fun.
This is a film based on a comic book character, and we wanted to give it a comic book feel. Now, when Ang first told me that he wanted to do the Hulk, he started looking at a lot of the old comic books, the first several years of the Hulk. It's pretty much 6 rectangles per page, very straightforward. As time went on, the graphic design of the comic books became more and more interesting and a real part of the storytelling itself. And that became something that was very appealing to us, and that was one of the things that really got me thinking about it.
I feel like I'm a translator of that wonderful comic world, and I try to make that happen in motion picture. I think that's a high cost for me, but they're very different medias.
You can't just take the layout of a comic book and put that on a movie screen. It doesn't work.
But of course, the comic is a still picture. You have a composition and a linear movement in itself, so that you don't quite capture in a motion picture.
If you try to lay out your movie screen that way and tell the story sequentially in panels, that you wind up wasting all your screen. So I tried to think about what I liked about those kinds of comic book layouts and try to figure out a way to come up with cinematic devices inspired by that.
So we do take some of the multi-images influences from the comic, not so much a split screen, but see if we can get more out of what we're looking at than the regular linear structure. I would like to see the whole moments from beginning, middle, and end, to see the choreography within one shot.
Normally in a movie, if you want to get from one shot to another, you cut, or you dissolve, or you fade out and you fade in, and that's about it. On this film, I had free rein to do anything we could think of to get from one shot to another or to combine 2 images on screen at once. In this film, we were working with ILM, who then executed the things that we temped in the editing room.
We're working on basically 2 different types of effects. You could break it down into multi-screen effects, where things are happening on screen from different settings at once, more like a comic book layout, and then transitions, where we go from one scene into another, or sometimes into a 3rd and 4th scene. The design of those elements starts actually in the Avid, where the editor will do a layout and he'll show what each panel is supposed to look like.
I had no interest in doing the split screens the way they had been done before, at least the way I had ever seen them done before. And a lot of what's sort of falling under the general category that we call the multi-image unit. Most of it's not what you would call normal split screens. They move around a lot, and there's a lot of just strange, blurry, wipey transitions that aren't split screens at all. Those are the things that I was more interested in.
Ang didn't want people to see where we were enacting our effect. So the more seamless and the more confusing we could make it, the better. Sort of keep the eye guessing.
Ang is a very bright guy, and he learns from what's available to him. His initial idea for the split screens was split screens, rectangles, boxes. But as we were working in the editing room, it was really interesting to see him go from a split screen to say, okay, where these trees are wiping in, let's leave Nick Nolte's eye on and kind of swoop it around the eye, and then, starting to think as crazily as we did about these kinds of effects, because he had never been thinking that way. I'd never been thinking that way until a few months earlier.
All right, let's jumpstart those brainwaves.
As a whole, the transitions sort of give the film this forward momentum, the idea that you're not waiting for a cut or a dissolve, but you're right into the next shot, and it's much more exciting than something you might have seen in a more conventional editorial style. Some of the most elegant transitions are the ones that the organic design or shape in an element is used to drive the transition from one into another.
The split screens are there to help tell the story. Sometimes you do split screens to show a number of different angles on the same thing. In addition to sometimes doing that, we tried to involve all these split screens in the storytelling, and that visual style became part of the storytelling style. We decided early on that we were going to try anything, or at least decide that anything was legal. Once you've decided that you're allowed to do anything, it's very liberating and a lot of fun, and coming up with some of these ideas was great fun.
Set. Here we go. We're rolling.
Action.
I think the circuit's kind of fried. I don't know, maybe you want to come...
The gamma's too high! Get out!
And how? And you go back to original framing. I would like to translate the excitement, the comic book, to the audience.
Action.
But I think in the comic book, nobody really cared about Bruce Banner. He's a loser, he's a wimp. I need somebody who has the Bruce Banner manner and the look, but in the same time, potentially he has to have that Hulk in him. I chose to work with Eric Bana because I found he has those qualities.
At the beginning, Ang, I can be lower, can't I? Just for the start?
I sort of need you to do both.
Okay.
Eric has that kind of power and that bottled up rage, you know, that was so essential to the Bruce Banner that we were creating for the movie.
You're making me angry.
There's something really caught off guard in his expression, you know, very vulnerable and kind of stuck, kind of scared, kind of vulnerable, and like a little boy.
There's something about his performance that just engages you. You want to watch him. You can't stop watching him. He's excellent.
You'd know I'd never hurt you.
I think you already have.
Through Jennifer and her performance as Betty, we come to care for Bruce Banner, and we come to understand the Hulk. She's the one who cares for both of them. And we'd be watching dailies, and we'd all be crying. That's the kind of truth and emotion that Jennifer Connelly is able to bring to the film and to the role of Betty.
She's brilliant, and she is beautiful to look at, and she brings intelligence to the movie. She has most of the quality that we're looking for in Betty Ross.
She comes onto the set, and you just always get to the heart of it.
It is quite a special experience working with her.
Yeah.
Ang is somebody who really works with people he respects and who gets the respect back from them. It was wonderful to see him working with people, let's say, like Nick Nolte, who was so engaged at the kind of philosophical level with what the script was about, that he and Ang would just have hours of discussion.
Or Abraham looking up at God, or Jesus Christ, he would start asking why. Okay. He's totally crazy, and I had one of the best times in my career working with Nick. He is always passionate about whatever the texture provide him. Any line you give him, any set you give him, he embrace it, he feel it. He's just purely brilliant in the movie.
This was a very surreal experience for me because Nick and Sam are quite literally two of my all-time favorite actors. And there were times when I was doing some stuff with these guys where I would literally fly above myself and look down and feel very, very, very privileged.
If you ever come within 1,000 yards of my daughter again, I'll put you away for the rest of your natural life.
I'm in love with Sam Elliott. Sam has that kind of authority, but he has a twinkle in his eye. We did not want General Ross to be a cardboard cutout of a bad military guy. And you know with Sam Elliott playing General Ross that there is going to be something humane at the heart of a general.
Sam Elliott is, aside from being a guy who looks great in uniform, is really an actor's actor. I mean, he simply has achieved a level of craft and stature that's almost unparalleled. He kind of is the general. Josh Lucas is somebody who has made literally dozens of films in the independent sector and was waiting for his day to emerge as a leading man.
You turn green and all these guys come in and kill you and I perform the autopsy. You don't? And maybe I go too far and break your neck.
Josh understood the movie completely from the get-go. He understood that he was playing a character that was in a comic book and that he could be a little bit broad, and he was depending on Aang to tone him into the tone that Aang wanted. He loved being the bad guy.
His character Talbot is quite glossy and the bad guy, and he had a blast doing that. Eric and I were sort of more the straight men in the middle in this sort of strange comic book world, you know. But it was really nice coming onto the set.
We've got a terrific team that Aang has chosen to work with on the film. There's Rick Heinrichs, who has done a number of the Tim Burton films, and the production design of this film is tremendous. And James Seamus, who's written a fabulous script.
My relationship with Aang now, we're on our 8th film. It's pretty much just an old married couple. He bothers me incessantly with appeals for very in-depth philosophical discussions as to why I'm doing this, why are we making this movie, what's at stake, until finally I can't take it anymore and I tell him to go away and actually write the screenplay.
And Fred Elms, who's a longtime collaborator of Aang's, is our director of photography. The look of the film is just luminous. It's an indie sensibility brought to an epic comic book canvas. Aang brought in an entire sensibility and a focus on what is it that drives Bruce Banner? What is it that brings the Hulk to life? It is a movie that has that kind of emotional depth. And, you know, and let's face it, drama comes out of conflict, and there's conflict galore in this movie.
Action. I will kill the second beat, which is the top. That's when Hulk stand up. So you wait until I call and go. Boom. What I call and go. So you are and you're go.
All right, is everyone clear? Let's spin it out and go to work. And we are rolling.
Be careful, Mark.
3, 2, 1, go!
It's a big movie. There's a lot of destruction and a lot of physical effects on the set. You know, it was very difficult work.
Whatever the Hulk does, comes in contact with, manipulates, pushes, shoves, breaks, touches, lifts, falls under the category of the on-set physical effects crew, which is my team. In this movie, we destroyed the entire lab, which was giant.
Those are real walls that are coming down and real windows that are being broken, real lab equipment that's being destroyed, and there's nothing phony about it.
Ready, and door, go!
And I think that a lot of people who see this movie might think that that is a regular-sized guy in a miniature set plowing his way through it, because it looks that real.
We moved on to San Francisco, where we took 12 cars and rolled them down Telegraph Hill with the Hulk cracking up the street, tipping a cable car with people falling out.
The entire street's supposed to erupt, and everybody's supposed to react to that. Yet there's no eruption actually taking place. So we had to really kind of have this fine integration with the CGI folks and the special effects department especially, because they were flipping cars and rolling or turning, tipping trolleys over, and people were falling off. And so we had to really work closely together for that, to make that scene work.
We moved on to the Sequoias, where we had the Hulk and animated dogs smashing the front of the car.
The dogfight primarily is computer generated, but prior to the fight actually beginning, the Hulk is talking to Jennifer Connelly's character, and he picks her up and he puts her on the roof of the car. And then he takes her off of the roof of the car when the dogs start to attack, and he sticks her in the car and slams the door. And that had to be a really fine integration between us and CG Hulk, so that when the Hulk carried her to the car, she bounced, she moved up and down so that it matched the Hulk's stride.
We then moved on to Victorville, where we blew up the 12,000 square foot housing complex with the military trying to attack. Moving into the Banner house, where we had more Hulk interactivity.
Bruce Banner gets really upset. Hulk's out, kicks the shit out of Talbot, and leaps away.
There's a scene where the Hulk kicks me through the wall of a house and I'm in a couch. And, you know, 9 cameras, amazing looking, huge explosion.
Which means, A, a couch has to lift itself, throw itself out the window. One of Charlie's guys has to be on the couch, on cue fall off the couch and hang up on a rail as the couch ends up down into the street. The next sequence, or part of that sequence, the Hulk walks out, bashes through the front of the house, boards, nails, screws flying everywhere, with Charlie's guys still on the rail, not hurting him. So any of those situations like that, Charlie and I meticulously talk about how we're going to design an explosion that will later appear as though the Hulk has created this by his force and walking through.
You have to really think about movement is important, how the actor moves in relationship to the way the Hulk is going to move when the animators get a hold of it.
3, 2, 1, go.
A lot of the movie is me getting beaten up physically by the Hulk or by, you know, the fights that Eric and I have, or being thrown around or being smashed into things.
We had a great time on this stuff, and we obviously have to place a lot of faith and trust in each other. And the good thing about the scenes with Josh was it was the only person that I really got to do some really heavy physical stuff with. So it was always a relief when he would come onto the set, even though he'd beat the crap out of me every time.
I think we've gone 10 steps beyond what the other movies have done right now in terms of integrating our character into real life. Our character gets involved right in the middle and walks through and touches things and lifts things and comes in contact with things way more than any character, I think, than you've seen before. My ultimate goal is to, in a finished movie, not have anybody know where we've handed off from animation to real life. It's been a really busy picture. It's been a really kind of satisfying one for me.
The Hulk is as much a character in this movie as any of the living, breathing actresses and actors that we have. So his ability to emote was critical.
He has to move like a real person. It has to look like a real person, and it had never been done before. But ILM is definitely at the forefront of all of this stuff.
It's incredibly difficult to make anything that is even close to being human out of an animated character, whether it's computer graphics or whatever. Because as we look at each other, we know that 300 little recognizable body motions that mean something. So we've had to learn all those and apply them to the Hulk correctly so that you think the Hulk has got this kind of childlike personality.
I think it's time to bring the sophistication in public entertainment in the computer world. So you can invest your emotion into it, not just watching the creature go crazy, where in the back of your head you know they're CGIs. I want to see if I can break that barrier.
The first step is to design the character. What does he look like?
The very first step we took was to do some concept paintings on how realistic was the Hulk's body. Is it a completely believable human musculature? Or is it more like a comic book where everything's bigger than normal? And that was probably some of the first explorations that we went through. When the LA department sent us the maquette, actually, in fact, this is the maquette that they sent us, this really kind of nailed for us what direction Ang wanted to go to.
There are 3 different Hulk creatures in the film. The trick was that he had to transform from a real live actor, from Eric Bana, into these various Hulk sizes, so all of the Hulks had to be built with those parameters in mind.
From that maquette, they build a CG model, which has every single element in that model, how it actually moves.
We were constantly making new versions of the Hulk. It's a very, very painful, long process about putting all the little detail. We have a whole team that just simply does the paint. Every little pore and every little detail, that's their job. Another team that's just sculpting the muscles. We bring in bodybuilders. We do extensive research on how the muscles bend.
Taking on this task, we knew that we had to get realistic poses out of the creature, and then on top of that, realistic muscle animation. and skin performance as well. We combined a lot of muscles that usually work together into these multiple stage shapes, where you could have one slider that would dial on a series of muscle motions, and then we'd wrap the whole creature up with a dynamic skin that would slide over the surface of these muscles.
There are a few technical challenges that we knew we had to solve in order to have Hulk be a believable human, and one of them was the skin itself. And I think we painted 100 different maps of paint and hair and wounds and specularity and all sorts of things to convey the translucency in skin and the realism of skin.
And then after the model's built, then it's a question of animating that model to look like it's working.
I think we use every single technique ever discovered in animation. It's really getting to the essence of the performance. Motion capture might be a way of getting there, but really what it is sitting down with Aang and saying, what are you going for here? We would show video of ourselves to Aang. We'd say, what do you think? Could Hulk act like this? Could he run like this? Anytime things were overly clean, he would say, no, that looks like animation. And so really the goal here is to not make it look like animation, to go for all those imperfections that come out of real life.
After the animation is approved, a technical director lights the shot based on some information that's gleaned from set and also referencing other shots in that sequence and coming up with unique ways to incorporate the character into the scene by moving objects around him.
We found through learning and just experience different ways to make him really mix into the background was adding things like dirt onto him and having him kick up dirt and just interact with his environment much more so than we ever have before. So we could try to make him as dirty and dusty and grimy and sweaty as we possibly can.
He's being shot at. There are wounds all over his body. You have to tear the skin, you have to have it heal again. He's interacting with water a lot, so you have to take care of all his wetness values and create a paradigm for that.
Generally, the animation is done several days or weeks in advance of when it actually comes to us. And then it's our job to integrate that into the scene. So it's a matter of lighting it, shading it, putting skin texture on him.
Here's the infamous Hulk throwing the tank shot, or DA-24 as we call it here. There probably were 3 to 4 dozen elements that added up to make this shot. You could see how the tank tread breaks off and all these different dynamic things that the animation team takes into account and does a great job with the muscle flexing and the hard surfaces reacting in a real way. This represents a computer-generated ground plane, and here's some computer-generated dust. Where he starts spinning it around, you can kind of see the footprints be depressed a little from the wind. So all these elements add up to this final shot. It's all about chaos in this sequence, trying to get it as chaotic as possible. And it's getting sand and dirt in the air and on the Hulk.
I'm interested in telling a story and actors. I mean, I care about the actors, and they're reacting to the work that I do, and my work is to react to the work that they do, and it's very close, and to me personally, to do this. A huge amount of effort, of course, went into making this thing look absolutely real, so you don't even think about it as an audience member. All you're thinking about is the character. The technology should be invisible. Only when it's over do you say, wow, how did they even do that?
Rolling Q3M2R, starting part 12, take 84. Recording.
Speed.
Well, my first thoughts were, this is impossible. It's a huge film and there really wasn't much time. But the combination of it being Ang Lee and then coming and seeing the film, I got hooked.
I should have some perk getting me into the downbeat in 96.
Something I don't quite have experience on. It's a big Hollywood movie that has an adventure, heroic taste to it. For this kind of movie, Danny knows what he's doing, so I think he can help me a lot on this particular genre. But in the same time, I was telling him I don't want the Danny Elfman.
So I'd be playing music and he'd go, no, that's too Danny Elfman, too Danny Elfman. And I really liked that. That's good for me. And so he was challenging me often to go move outside of my own perspectives.
Hulk is about the artificial way that we brought the inside alter ego out to exposure, So we want both the majestic grandness of the classic horror picture and grandiose to it.
His perspective on the characters in the movies was always very clear. He seemed to know how he felt about it, and his clarity made it much more easy for me to work.
Okay, hold please. When I have the G sharp to the A, you really want to also, it's like you want to feel that there's like a half tone rubbing in there, especially into the last, it's like really nasty, you know, that trumpet cluster shape.
Okay.
They just got to put the gravel and the nastiness in the tone. It's all about the tone there. One more time, please.
127.
The first and most important thing is the tone of the film. What is the tone of the characters? And finding the tone between what happened, a horrible tragedy, repressed memories, an intense relationship between a father and a son who creates this monster, the whole idea of within each of us is this monster waiting to break out.
I think by pulling down the crescendos, I keep the whole thing a little stronger. It'll be
Either that or raise the
level of the cello basses.
As a composer, I have to get into a mode where I'm like a heat-seeking missile, and I have to lock onto my target and stay on it really intensely. Aang enabled me to do that, to lock on and stay on it with him. It was really an amazing process.
That was a great performance. I like even just a touch more nastiness. This is what we're calling the Hulk out.
I love writing music that's aggressive. I love taking out my aggression through the orchestra in my music when I can. It was very clear. Repressed, repress, repression, breaking out, and exploding.
Very exciting. Your music finally put into your movie to see its completion. It's a great pleasure.
The Hulk is just a very dramatic version of the same stuff that we all go through.
Aang had a lot of intensity about the movie and his art form.
All this bottled up tension is what the song's about. It's a pretty good marriage, the actual theme of the song and what the Hulk is all about.
Hulkamania.